Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, lovely people. This is Marie Alessi with yet another episode of Unsilence Grief. And I'm so excited to have you here live with us today, Georgie, because you've been connected with me. Actually, we've been connected for a while
Yeah.
on social media, I think on Facebook. And then
hmm
I was actually putting a shout out there because I had a last minute cancellation for this podcast here. And my beautiful friend Gemma, who will also be live here at some stage, we're still talking dates, said, "Oh, I know these two amazing ladies." And one of them was you. And I looked you up and I'm like, "Oh, we're already friends."
Yeah.
I saw that our chat has been going back quite some time, but we hadn't connected for quite a while. So it was such a beautiful, bizarre moment of reconnecting with you because you've been working in the space of grief for a while. But today is more really about your personal story. And I am really, really touched that you are happy to jump on live with me and share from your heart. So without further ado, would you like to introduce yourself, please, and welcome?
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. So, yeah, my name is Georgie Hansen. I'm the CEO of Mosaic Media. I started, so I help visionary women, female leaders bring their stories to life and publish them and create legacies. And I started this because in 2017, I lost my daughter at full term. And one of my best friends had said to me on the night of her funeral, her heart was in 1,000 pieces, but she didn't look broken to me. She looked like a beautiful mosaic of all she had overcome. I didn't start my business for about 6 years after I
Mm,
lost Amelia, but in between there was all these like breadcrumbs, all of these pieces, and I finally realized that all of my like professional experience, but then sharing my story and being a writer,
mm.
I had shared my story in a couple of anthologies, and I just was so fascinated by the whole thing. And then it just landed, and it actually landed on the day of what would have been Amelia's sixth birthday. I had already started my publishing company, but
What? It's
yeah,
not.
I know
It's a
I had
beautiful.
started it, and I knew that there was some kind of the brand wasn't right. There was something still not landing. And I
Mm,
knew that there was a change of name coming. And the night before what would have been her sixth birthday, my best friend sent me a message and said, "I'm raising my glass to beautiful Amelia and her magical mosaic of a mother." And then I woke up the next morning. I sat up bolt right in my bed, and I heard Mosaic Media. I was like, oh, and
wow.
all of the pieces, like the breadcrumbs, all just fit into this puzzle, this mosaic.
This mosaic is so,
And
so perfect. All the
I
pieces of
know,
the mosaic.
I know, because for years people had been saying to me, like mentors and friends, like all of the pieces are there. You just got to wait for them to land. And I was like, well, when are they going to land? And I had, I'd been life coaching, and I had been working in the grief space with angel mamas, and I had been all sorts of things like throwing spaghetti at walls, left, right, and center. And then when I realized, oh my God, like I'm meant to be doing this and help it, it wasn't to help women share their grief stories, although those women kind of are drawn to me, and I've put out books similar, like with their stories. But it's now female leaders who have a voice and have a message to share. But how can we also know that whatever we walk through, like not necessarily unfathomable loss like we've experienced, but like
Yeah.
trauma, and how can we alchemize that and create a legacy? Like my whole point is to shift perspectives around life and the awe and wonder of it. And it all makes sense. Like it all ends up exactly how it's meant to be. And that's a really hard conversation to have with in the grief space.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
that you know that.
Yeah, no, I just so love that you bring that up because I had an interview with a gentleman yesterday, and I have to say, um, we had this beautiful chat at the end, and I'm going to quickly share this because I want to bring this back to you and get your perspective on this. He said to me at the end of the interview, you're the fourth interview that I had this month, and I have not gone to such depth in a really, really long time. And I said to him, I'm going to put it like very rough number, about 1,000 interviews that I've done in my life. This is very much like a calculation, yeah,
It's a lot. It's a lot.
doesn't really matter. I've done a lot, and I said it has been a long time for me since I host had held space for me like he did, where I could literally go down to the depth of the emotion again. I was so emotional through the interview, and I was really surprised about it because I had shared my story so many times. And I really make an effort to have a different approach every time, but it is my story. I've shared it a lot of times. There are a lot of things that you do sort of word similarly, and always hope that it lands in, sorry, in the right heart at the right time, basically. And after that, like we also had this conversation, and that's why I'm bringing this up, how emotionally we both were around that, where he came from this perspective, everything happens for a reason. And we openly talked about that without me, sort of lecturing him or anything. I said this is a really, really great conversation to have, because a lot of people have that understanding or that belief that everything happens for a reason. And so do I. I'm one of them. And when you're in the thickness of grief, like in the depth of the pain, the hurt, the emotions, and somebody says to you, "Oh, everything happens for a reason," it is like a slap in the face. There is a time and place to say this, and the same thing goes for gratitude. I think those two things, everything happens for a reason, and just be grateful for what you have. Gratitude and grief, whew, there needs to be a space in between. You can't have them shoulder to shoulder. And in that space is where healing needs to happen. I'd love to hear your take on that, because I feel when people come in too quickly in the most vulnerable time with either it happens for a reason, or he's in a better place, or she's in a better place, or, just be grateful. Yes, and, I don't think it is the right comment in that time. I feel anyway, I'm going to let you share, because I'd really like to hear your take on that. Hey, have you been
Yeah.
confronted with that? People
Yeah.
said it to you?
There's been a lot of stupid comments. There's even a lot in the very early stages. And I had the perspective from the moment before she was even born. I had the perspective of a higher perspective. So I was in very active labor when we found out.
Yeah.
And I I had a really sacred experience
Mm,
after just finding out. And I still had to go on and birth her. But I still had this, there's something bigger than me at play here. There's something far bigger. There's a reason this is happening. I don't know why, but so I had that perspective immediately that something was happening outside of me that I can't fathom, that I can't comprehend, and I might never until the day that I die.
mm,
But I knew that it was bigger than me. So I had a very vastly different perspective to most people.
mm,
And that has been a really lonely path to walk. But I also was still a mother in the primal rawness of grief. And I still, so even though I had the highest, like the 5D perspective, I also had the perspective of the raw primal grief that happens when you experience the loss of a child.
yeah.
And so I still had, it was almost like, I'm allowed to believe that, but you're not allowed to tell me.
Yeah.
no
Exactly.
one's allowed
That's
no one's allowed to
exactly.
tell me that, like,
Yeah.
I know that it's happening for a reason bigger than me,
Mm,
but someone who hasn't walked my shoes hasn't got a right to say that to me, because how would you know?
mm,
Even I don't say it to other angel mums, like I because I know what their experience is, and I am very, very careful about, like, sharing my perspective, because they might not be in a place to receive that.
yeah.
And it has to come from within them
Mm,
before and they may never experience that. It has to come from within them before anyone else has a right to say anything like it happened for a reason, or there's some reason why they're not here, or anything like that.
mm,
It has to it has to come from within them first. And even if it comes within them first, you hold space for that. You don't project
yeah.
onto what you're like as someone else from the outside. Oh yeah, it definitely happened for a reason. She's in a better place. That
Mm.
just needs to be held back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I so agree with you, and I so love that you say that it has to come from within. For me, I often have this comparison where I feel like If somebody comes up to you and tells you that, it is like somebody running up to the Christmas tree on Christmas Eve and unwrapping your gift for you. You know, that wasn't yours to unwrap. That was mine. And it wasn't
Mhm.
time yet, you know. So
Yeah.
there is this, I'm like, oh, I I often shared this. It took me a long time to share it, and this is why I'm mentioning this here right now in this conversation, that I had what I now call a spiritual epiphany a few weeks after Rob passed away. And I still remember it, and I can't even say so vividly, it was more like so emotionally. I still remember it so emotionally, when I had this understanding, where it's like, wow, Rob and I have chosen this on a soul level. We have chosen this. And that to me was overwhelming at that moment, beautiful and reassuring and painful and
All the things.
sad and happy and grateful and all of the emotions. I still remember how intense that understanding was that I had in this moment. And it took me a long time to process it. And it took me even longer to be able to share it with my closest circle. And it took me way longer to be able to share it now on interviews or in conversations, publicly. And I'm happy to share it now because I always say you need to give people that space to come to that place where they can talk about it, and then they own it. And then it's still not yours to tell them. It's their gift. I talk about that as a hidden gift in adversity. When we come to an understanding that helps us, with acceptance, or that helps us to heal, that is a huge gift. And they take time to receive, to process, and to maybe be able to share them as well. I love that you are on the same page with that, because I
Yeah.
feel people often don't know, and that's when those, I really want to call them out openly, mistakes happen. You just can't tell people that. You
Yeah.
just can't tell people he or she's in a better place. It's almost like implying that he wasn't or she wasn't in a good place with you. You
Yeah.
can't say that. You
Yeah.
can't say
I
that
think it
because
always comes from it never comes from a place of malice. And this,
exactly, never.
I have compassion for, I have compassion for whoever is
Mm,
talking because I, I believe that they're always coming from a place of wanting to make you feel better.
yeah,
But the thing that most people can't sit with is someone else's grief. They can't sit with that. They want to fix it.
yeah,
And sometimes when just having that space to sit with someone in their grief is the greatest gift that you can give them. Not
yeah,
trying to fix it,
yeah,
not trying to make it better, just holding space for whatever they're walking through. And most people, I lost 90% of my circle. Most people can't sit in the uncomfort of that. So I think that is like that is what we can do for people, is to sit with them and not fix it. And the greatest thing that anyone ever said to me was, I don't have the words. I can't imagine what you're feeling. And I wouldn't want them to. I
mm,
wouldn't want, if anyone compares my grief to, there were one of my best friends compared my grief to something so materialistic.
mm,
And it ended our friendship because I couldn't, I just couldn't go there with her anymore.
yeah,
And um I think if you compare, like, even I can't compare my grief to yours or to another angel mums. It's just
mm,
everyone's got their own, there's no hierarchy in this level of grief and
yeah.
trauma.
Thank you.
And I think everyone comes to it in their own space.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing that the worst thing you can do is not saying anything. And the
Mm,
second best thing you can do is to try and put words to it that
yeah.
you like, that are beyond you. So
It's such a tricky situation for people on the outside. And I've never heard anybody put it in such perfect words. There is no hierarchy to grief. That's exactly it. Because I always use the term, comparison doesn't help us heal. It's completely lost in the space of grief. There's nothing to compare. Your grief is always the worst one to you. And even if you do get to a space where, like, well, at least this and that happened in my case and not in that, and I'm like, well, that is just trying to compartmentalize, or to sort of suppress something that just needs to be lived, that just needs to be held. And I would love if you're okay to share that, you can share as much or as little as you like, because I understand this journey is so deeply personal. When you so often in hindsight, like I had this happen when people, okay, let me start again. What I want to say is people often use that sentence in grief, and it's like, oh, nothing prepares you for that. And I often think when you look back, well, didn't it? Like I look back and there's all these, I'm having goosebumps just saying that, all these
Mm.
milestones over the decades of my life that led up to Rob's passing, where all of a sudden I could see, like, oh my God, wow, wow, how did I get prepared for what was to come? And I, of course, had no idea, but I did get prepared for what was happening. You just don't see it. But then when you look back on your timeline and you see all these different events or trainings that you've done, like in my case, the mindset coaching, like those tools, how much they have helped me. My dad's passing, how I didn't know how to deal with it and what came out of that. How did that help me to cope with it differently? Are you standing here right now, like 8 years later, looking back and seeing all those milestones? Have you had these moments? If you don't mind sharing, you don't have to.
And I mean, I think I've thought about it, but not until you've just said that. I've like, yeah, so it's something that I've consciously known or subconsciously known, but
Mm.
there was definitely and I've shared this before. I had a picture perfect pregnancy. She was fourth baby. I only ever had 5 midwife appointments um because they were like, this is your fourth baby, you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And on the very last appointment, which was 2 weeks before she was due, I had the midwife said, how's the movements? And I was like, oh, she's pretty like quiet during the day. And then she has a party at night. And she goes, I'll just keep an eye on her movements. And I said, oh, okay. Why? Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? What's,
Mm.
what do the movements mean?
Yeah.
And she's like, well, a, a, a lack of movements or a difference in
Yeah.
movements can mean something. I was like, well, what's the worst case? And she said, well, stillbirth. And I was like, oh, I didn't think that actually
Secondly,
happened.
just like that.
The worst case scenario is this, that
Wow.
baby is, I don't think she used those exact words, but it was like, that was the end. Like
Yeah.
it could lead to a stillbirth. And in my head, I was like, does that even happen? I thought that was an urban myth. In my head, I was like, we don't get educated on the stats of it. So that was it. That was like, I never really thought much more about it. And then um about a week leading up to her birth, I even said to this friend who I'm no longer really friends with, I said, I just feel like I'm not excited. Like I had been waiting for her for
Yeah.
10 years. I had 3 boys and
Mm.
I always knew that this soul was coming to me.
Yeah.
And um, I, like had been preparing for it mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, energetically for a long time and was so
Mhm.
excited. And everyone around us was so excited. I tracked like everyone was emotionally invested in the journey of this soul coming. Like even online, people were excited because it wasn't just a baby girl. It was like this woman has been waiting for this Amelia like for a long time. I shared how, I would see her in little girls. I'd see her like with curly blonde hair in toddlers. And so it wasn't just like our circle, it was a bigger circle. And
Yeah.
then in the last week, I just felt like this lack of what I thought I'd be feeling like my dreams coming true. And I actually said that out loud to my friend. She goes, oh, maybe it's just like, your dreams finally coming true and you're not sure what's on the other, like,
Yeah.
um, but now obviously that was my preparation because
Yeah.
I could not see her in our life. I had the capsule. You know how like when you're having a baby and you're like, I can't wait to bring them home and I'll see them in their pram and see them
Yeah.
in their capsule and like in their room. And I stood in her room for hours, like just looking at everything. And so it's the first nursery I had prepared before the baby was arriving. And I was just so prepared, but I, like at the time I didn't think anything of it, but I couldn't see her. coming home with us. I couldn't see her in her bassinet. I couldn't see her. And so that's another thing that I was prepared.
Was that though that you were consciously aware of it at the time or just in hindsight?
No, but there was something subconsciously because I said it out loud to my friend. I said, I can't, I never said that I couldn't see her. It
Mm,
was only in hindsight, but I did say that I'm not feeling the excitement that I thought that I would feel. And then
mm,
on the way to hospital, there was this sense of like doom. There was this sense of like the clouds. It wasn't, I can't even remember if it was doing this little bird just sitting outside, like, oh, that's a sign. Um, there was a there was like a wash of clouds had come over. But
mm,
I don't even know if there was, but there was just this like storm
mm,
brewing. And you know how you can feel like in your bones when there's a storm brewing? And I also was consciously thinking, what is this? Why do I feel like this? Because
mm.
I had no signs that she wasn't alive. I've tried to rack my brain for that whole day of like how her movements were tracking, but I was in labor. So I, you know, very like 5 minutes apart contractions. So that's what I was focusing on. I
Yeah, of
don't
course.
know when I last felt her move,
Mm,
but I don't think I was meant to.
mm,
And so there's those three. But for like I had been on a spiritual journey of awakening for about a decade before. I had been doing the work. So
mm,
that's another thing. I also lost my dad when I was 6. And so I hadn't been a stranger to grief. And I had, in my teenage years, I had really dealt with grief. And I had also heard my dad in spirit a couple of years before, probably about that. Actually, it was the same year. It was the same year that I fell pregnant with Amelia. So I
mhm.
heard his thick Scottish accent after 30 years of like feeling him around, but I heard him. And
Yeah.
so he was always there guiding me. But it was this like I was connected to her soul and her spirit before she was born, and she's now part of my sacred team with my dad.
Oh,
And so there's all
oh,
of these things.
team. I love that. Oh,
Yeah.
what a beautiful term.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're all like all of these things have probably prepared me. My
Mm,
like I think my whole entire life I was prepared in
mm,
some way
yeah.
because it's the moment that everything shifted. I was the woman before that moment and I'm the woman after. I feel like there was a fracture in my timeline, not a bad one, just two different lives being lived, same person, but
Yeah.
it had such a profound impact, not in just like in a bad way, but in a beautiful way.
Mm.
I don't
Well,
see losing her as a bad thing anymore. I,
yeah.
I, and I know that that's really a strange thing to say and a hard thing to hear, but yeah, I
Beautiful
can't.
because it is just such a I don't even want to call it glimmer. It's a bright shine of hope, really, what you're saying here, because I feel we're still living in a society that strongly believes or spreads the belief that we cannot heal from grief. And I don't agree with that. You know, we can do a lot of healing and we can handle grief differently. So my most favorite one is that I treat grief like a visitor, not like a permanent resident. And people are like, no, no, grief's always there. I'm like, well, I don't see it as such. You know, I don't feel grief present in my life all the time at all. You know, it's a rare visitor these days. And for us, it's been 7 years next week, actually. So I want to ask you a question that goes really, really deep. And I know I asked permission before we went live if I can ask you anything. And again, you can answer as much or as little as you want to about your own story. But I really hope that you can give us some sort of tools how to deal with the aftermath when it comes to the public questioning, because I can only imagine that you would encounter that many times. People going like, "Oh, so did you have the baby yet?" And then, like how I can only imagine when it's a stillbirth and it happens sort of so last minute that you only find out during giving birth that there would be people waiting to hear the news and how I know that there are angel mamas listening to this podcast. Have you got anything to help them with that phase? How to address that?
Mm, I had a really kind of awful experience with that because
Imagine.
um we shared obviously with our inner circle immediately.
Mm.
My school, my son's school, he was in year one at the time. My eldest was in year one.
Wow.
And the experience I had was everyone knew, obviously, they could see. There was some rumors of people who were told, but not one mother came up to me and said, I'm sorry. They all would whisper, like they would turn their heads and whisper
God.
instead of coming up to me and saying, like, there was a couple who were my friends and who obviously were, close, but there were rumors. Even one woman said, I don't understand what happened. Didn't she go to her appointments? That was said behind my back. And then like, and the person who was telling me was like stood up for me. But I couldn't face that. I had zero tolerance for
Yeah.
BS after that. And so it was just like, no, no, like boundary just went straight up. And if you're not with me, then you're not with me. Um, so, and I also had, there was other much more compassionate things that happened. Like we were running a trade services business. I had a supplier who didn't know. They sent flowers
Mm.
um, and a card, but I thought that was because they knew that there was no baby. And I went in one day and one of the guys said, oh, you're out and about quick. And I was like, yeah, yeah. Like, and he said, where's the baby? Is it at home? Like, didn't, and I was like, she didn't survive. And his face just was like, he could have seen a ghost. He was like, he organized the flowers for the boss. It's like, I didn't know. I thought we were organizing flowers because to congratulate you. I'm so sorry. None of us were told. And whose fault is it? Like they weren't,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure he told the boss.
Mm.
And so he should have told the rest of the staff. So it's slip ups like that people don't mean, but
Yeah. In his head, it might have just gone like, him processing, 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 and then eventually going, like, can you organize flowers for the baby? Forgetting that detail. That's the most important one.
yeah,
It's because she
yeah.
didn't
He
survive.
just
And
organized like the flowers to be sent, not knowing
yeah.
no one would even consider that option. But it was just that
And you don't want to consider that as an option, who would even think that?
no. So was tools in terms of um I think you have to be really strong with your boundaries and your standards and not be afraid to protect them at all costs and protect your peace at all costs. And if that means, being blunt, because I was blunt with a few people, if that means I can't have this conversation and I need to walk away, if that means um like telling someone how it is, it just means like you have to honor and protect your peace at all costs because it will that's what matters most and that's the thing that will come back to bite you because if you're people pleasing, if you're making people I was making so many other people feel comfortable with my grief. Like I was projecting out like making other people feel okay because I had the perspective of the higher perspective, but in hindsight I shouldn't have had to be the one to do that.
No,
So I
you
think
have
it's
space to
yeah,
hold for your own family and for yourself. Yeah.
yeah. One thing I really believe that has, and I'm now writing a book on, not on my grief, but on my whole story, like just my whole life, how I alchemize every single thing into gold, and how I've built a successful business and all of that. But the thing that I've realized, even just in the last week or so, my process for moving through things and healing is is something so simple, and it was connecting back to the oneness with that
Mm.
is connecting us to God, universe, source, whatever you want to call it. Um, and like nature, like I grounded, I would stand in my backyard every day and just like look at this father sky, mother earth, like bring a beam of light down and just, I know that sounds very spiritual, but just connecting,
I
even if
love
it's
it.
being out in nature, like seeing the beauty of the sky and the ocean and the trees. And when you can expand out to see the bigness of it, makes your your grief smaller, I think.
Mm.
And like it's seeing the awe and the wonder
Yeah.
of everything, but also in the grief, because it has to coincide and coexist with joy. And I know we were speaking about this offline, like, where is my joy?
Yeah.
But you have to,
Point.
but my joy has always been there, but it's been through these little, like, it's the simplest things, like sitting on the deck and having a cup of tea and just looking at the sky, like in awe.
I love
Doesn't
that
have
you mentioned that because, like, after I've published my third book, I said, I'm happy to share that now because at this moment has passed and this is not ever going to happen. But this title came to me because I was sitting outside on our deck in the sunshine eating porridge, and the title came to me for our next book, and I'm like, oh, porridge on the front porch. What a cool title for a book. But then there was no book that followed up on that. But it's exactly that. It came in such a simple moment of joy, just in that simplicity. And when you said, Mother Nature, I love just taking my shoes off and standing. Like, even when it's winter, sometimes I need that grounding. I know exactly what you're talking about when you talk about this connection from Father Sky and Mother Earth. Like, I love that. I always said that in so many interviews, like, Mother Nature is really one of our biggest healers. So yeah, it really
Yeah.
is not even that simple, it's that vastness of the universe holding us when you can lean into that. It's amazing.
Mhm.
Georgie, I know we are already a little bit over time, but I do want to have a quick little, we can call it ad break, it doesn't matter. You are developing something at the moment, and I know it's not directly related to your grief story, but it's part of your story and how you came to that. And maybe some people are listening to that who have a story inside of them. So can you share a little bit about what's coming?
Yeah. So within my publishing company and ghostwriting for other people, I realized that I had been building this AI behind the scenes. And I've tried lots of AI copywriting platforms. And I've also tried lots of, like, you know, book writing courses. And I've created my own book writing course. But this is called Ora, ORA, the writing oracle.
Mhm.
And it's kind
Love
of
it.
just been as a extension of my brain and my channel.
Mm.
And I've worked out how we can use AI in like, not a soulless way
Mhm.
to write on our behalf. So it's a 30-day book portal where we use the AI to co-write with us and to extract the message, to extract your transformation, and all of the book frameworks that I've created, to just do it in a quantum leap style, because I believe we all have a story to share. Not many people go ahead and actually write the book,
Yeah.
but it's like, why not make it easier for ourselves, especially when we've been through so much already. So yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here today, Georgie. I love how authentically you share your story because I really feel when people are still in the midst of grief or in that mud of grief, I want to call it, because to me it feels like something that is very, very muddy, where we need people to hold space for us, to help us come out of it and just be there. Like, that whole idea of we don't need to fix it, we just need to be present. I think that's really the main message that I want to highlight in our conversation. So I will put some links in the show notes where people can connect with you. And
Mm-hmm.
for now, I just want to hug you. I just want to say thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story. And this is Georgie and Marie signing off. Thanks for
Thank
watching. Bye for now.
you.
Thank you.